Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel and click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Please like the video too if you do indeed like it. Share them. Please help grow the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's start with Terence Crawford and some controversial comments he's made about Canelo Alvarez. I'm going to talk about what he said, what he said, how it's been interpreted and why it's caused a bit of a furore in boxing, why I think people have misinterpreted what he said, but also why I think he's wrong. Okay, so we'll start off with the actual quote itself. He basically came out and accused Canelo Alvarez of ducking black fighters. He said he shied away from Jamal Charlo and Andrade for a long time. When you look at Canelo's career, it's like he shied away from the black fighters. I think the black fighters give him the most problems. He goes on to say, Canelo wants to be unified, undisputed champion with fighting the soft opposition, and that's like not a real legacy. That's not a real champion. That's not a champion by heart. That caused a bit of a furious response from Mike Coppinger, who said, incredible to have Terence Crawford accusing someone else of shying away from fights, let alone someone like Canelo, whose number 10 toughest opponent eclipses Crawford's best. As you can imagine, this caused a furore online. People have been going at Crawford, who put out a tweet to say, I see a lot of people butthurt. Guess what? And people have been coming at him and he's been just laughing them off, just silly stuff, basically. He's become a little bit immature. But let's talk about this. First and foremost, I don't actually think he's talking about skin color. I think he's referring to boxing skill, culture, the culture of boxing. This has nothing to do with the skin color you actually are. I believe what he's trying to say, and like I said, I disagree with this, and I'll get onto it why, but let me explain first. I think he's trying to talk about a specific skill set that more black fighters bring to the sport. Now, why would that make sense? Well, because different groups might have established themselves with particular martial arts systems, and those systems have their strengths and their weaknesses, and they have their ideas. Now, when you're talking, for instance, about the Cuban style, let's talk about forget African Americans for a minute, because I do think he's talking about African Americans. If Canelo was to fight a black British fighter or a black African fighter like an Ndongo, the way he fought in Ndongo, I don't think this would stop Crawford's criticism. I think he's talking specifically about African American fighters. To make this point, let's talk about Cuban and Mexican fighters first and foremost. When it comes to Cuban fighters, there's a particular style that's quite prominent and prevalent. And that is the concept of being in and out, moving around the ring, keeping you at bay, hitting and not getting hit. Some people call it fencing, whatever it is you want to call it. Now, why did this system establish itself in Cuba? The reason is because of the very nature of the society in Cuba. Cuba is a communist nation. There is no individual liberty. You're not taught about having your individual freedoms to pursue your dreams. In the United States, in the US Constitution, the right to pursue happiness is actually guaranteed in the US Constitution. Happiness isn't guaranteed, but the pursuit of it is. There's nothing like that in Cuba. It's not about the individual. It's not about your individual happiness. It's not about your individual emancipation. It's about order. It's about the order that the state wants to provide. And as a result, you must do your utmost for the collective nation. The nation is what deserves, according to the communist system, the plaudits, the glory, and so on and so forth. So when you're training as a Cuban fighter, your entire job is to train to win medals at the Olympic Games. You need to go and win a gold. You need to do the best you can for the legacy, for the prestige of the country. And this is why so many Cuban fighters, they run away from Cuba and they go and establish themselves in the US in order to achieve their dreams. Now let's consider Mexico. Mexico, very, very different. In Mexico, the top level fighters never go to the Olympics. The top level fighters turn pro when they're very, very young. And they learn on the job quite often without any amateur experience, and they try to build themselves up to becoming superstars. They want to become the next Canelo Alvarez, the next Juan Manuel Marquez. They want to make millions. Because in Mexico, you do have the opportunity to break out of your difficult situation and emancipate yourself financially. You have the opportunity to go and win titles in your given division and establish yourself as a hero for the Mexican people. So you're still representing Mexico and you're still bringing prestige to the country, but you have a chance to get out of the tough, rough streets of Guadalajara and get yourself on a yacht and a mansion and so on and so forth. So you are fighting to emancipate yourself, and therefore you are fighting to achieve maximum level of success in the professional game where the money will come, rather than in the amateur game where it's about the prestige of the nation. As a result, Mexican fighters aren't built around the Olympic system of touch and don't get touched, hit and don't get hit, maintain range, move around the ring. No. I'm going to work to be durable, to be able to take shots, to dish out incredible amounts of volume, to overwhelm opponents. Even if I'm not at the same level as them in skill, in terms of will and in terms of pressure and in terms of volume, I will make them crumble. And by making them crumble, I will achieve something great. Now, I was having this discussion with a gentleman on Twitter called Rob Powell. And Rob Powell took exception, and he was saying, look, there's no such thing as an African-American style. Are you telling me Andrade fights like Hagler, for example? It's bullshit from Crawford to suggest he's avoiding black fighters when he beat Jacobs, who has the best resume at middleweight. But what I was trying to explain is that there's a fighting culture, and the fighters build upon that established idea that they've been given, and they build their own artistry. So you can get differences between fighters within the same ethnic group or demographic. We're not talking about ethnicity per se, okay? Dorticos isn't a typical Cuban fighter. And he asked me, look, are you telling me there's a white American style? No, there's no white American style because, like I said, it's not about race. It's about culture and a schooling and a system. So there's an Italian American style, traditionally speaking, Rocky Marciano, Carmen Basilio, these sorts of fighters. They would be, and even then, you have outliers. Paulie Malignaggi does not fit into that. Willie Pep did not fit into that. But generally speaking, Italian-American fighters were known for being very rugged, very physically strong, manipulating your body on the inside, and throwing big, hard power punches. Not too dissimilar from Mexican, but with Mexico, often it's a lot, particularly in the lighter weight categories, there's more emphasis on volume than there is on power. You also get some Mexicans that want to plant their feet and overwhelm you with power, but that's probably because they're more natural power. Those specific fighters are naturally powerful punchers. Whereas the idea really is to try and overwhelm your opponent with varied combinations of extreme volume. Italian-American fighters would be tough and rugged, and they take you to places you don't want to go by busting you up, breaking you up. That was the idea. So you do get concepts that are passed down, and this happens because you will often get gyms in areas that are rich in a particular style of ethnicity or demographic of people. And what would happen is, if trainer A teaches his protege a particular system, like it's a martial art, their own system of fighting, he's going to teach it to all the students in his neighborhood. Now, if those students, young fighters, are also from that same ethnic background, because that's the nature of the neighborhood, they're then going to pass it on to others. And again, it starts to spread among people within that community. Now, in the more modern day, we've seen a moving away from this and a more meshing of styles, because what's happened is, as the world has become more globalized and fighters have gone here and they've gone there to spar, and they've brought trainers from around the world, and they've, the world's become a smaller place essentially, you're obviously going to pick up different things along the way. So you start to see Tyson Fury, who's not a typical fighter in terms of British style. You start to see fighters from the Eastern Bloc like Lomachenko and Usyk that deviate from what is the typical Soviet system of boxing, which again is built around trying to get medals for the USSR. Very upright, very technically gifted, straight jabs, straight right hands, very, very good. But people would, you often hear Westerners talk about being robotic. Whereas in the modern age, a lot of these former Soviet bloc fighters, they're not fighting in that same way. Some of them still are, and they've perfected it or advanced it, but a lot of them are fighting differently, and they're incorporating a lot more movement. Guys like Lomachenko, guys like Usyk, guys like the Klitschko brothers, all of them Ukrainian. But all of them, their movement is based around footwork. They want to have good footwork and be not just in and out, but to come around you with great footwork. You don't really ever see Usyk or Lomachenko bobbing and weaving. You never saw, obviously the Klitschko brothers were big guys, so it's different because they're not going to really come under shots, but it wasn't a style that they've developed. It's not typical of what we're associating now with this new emergence of a Ukrainian or Eastern Bloc style. Now there's a lot more movement. There's more when it comes to the feet. When it comes to African-American fighters, you get so many different styles. It's true. It's true to say Hagler's nothing like Andrade. Okay, but one of the things that African-American boxing or boxing culture places a great emphasis on, and look out for this and you'll see, is upper body movement. So where Usyk and Lomachenko want to come around you with different creative variations of footwork, with African-American fighters, there tends to be a lot more upper body movement. Now, this applies whether you're light on your feet and you're moving around the ring like a Floyd Mayweather, who wants to maintain range, but is also comfortable on the inside, of course. But whether you're that sort of fighter, or whether you've got quite a wide base and you're actually quite, not immobile, but you're less mobile and you're more about producing power. Guys like Gervonta Davis, guys like Adrian Broner, okay? Regardless of where you fall, all of them value the concept of upper body movement. Golovkin is one of the great middleweights, without a shadow of a doubt. Look at the way African-American trainers analyze him and fighters analyze him. What did Floyd say about Golovkin? There's no special effects. There's no 3D. Very basic, up and down. Now, you're never going to call Golovkin a basic fighter. What he does is unbelievable. But it's a style that doesn't fit into what is typically the African-American culture of boxing. By the same token, there's going to be many things that the Eastern Bloc fighters will look at African-American fighters at and say, nah, I don't like that. X, Y, and Z. You know, there's not enough power produced there. It's a points-based system. They're running. They're doing this. They're doing that. And so on and so forth. So you have this differing viewpoint coming from the lens of boxing culture. It's like different martial artists looking at an opposing martial art and judging it. And you see that in MMA too. Go and see how, I don't know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters will talk about boxers or talk about taekwondo fighters, right? Taekwondo's got a bit of a poor reputation in MMA, except for one particular kick, which is considered one of the best kicks in mixed martial arts. But with that kick aside, Taekwondo is more about balance and a point scoring system. It is to mixed martial arts what Cuban style boxing is to boxing. So the point is, you have these different lenses to judge by. Sticking on that MMA theme, there's a reason we don't see Brazilian boxers, that many of them anyway. What? Because Brazilians can't fight? Brazil is one of the most dominant groupings of fighters in the UFC. Why? Because Royce Gracie, or the Gracie system, Royce Gracie first made it famous, I guess, in the UFC, but the Gracie system of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is so revered in Brazil that these fighters that are growing up, when you're a young, talented fighter capable of fighting, your dream is not to become the new heavyweight boxing champion of the world. It's to become the new UFC champ. So what happens is, goes back to what we were saying before, that system gets passed down through generations. Now, if we were talking about another sport, what Crawford's talking about is not actually that controversial. Let's take football, for instance. In Spain, they play a very short passing system, a very technical game of football, the tiki-taka style. Well, if you were to take a team like Sevilla, for example, obviously, you know, Barcelona really made the tiki-taka style famous, but you know, there's a prevailing system of football in Spain which equates to short technical passing. If you were to say, right, Sevilla are playing an Italian team today who are very, very technically gifted and like to play a short passing game, but Sevilla are better at it than them. And so as a result, I believe Sevilla win this game. However, if Sevilla play a team that's not as technically gifted as that particular Italian team, but this particular team is from, you know, it's a Northern European team, they're playing maybe a Swedish team, they're playing the traditional 4-4-2 with wingers and crosses, and they're trying to get in behind and get the team long balls over the top and get the defenders turning. They're not used to that system, you might say. So I believe Sevilla will slip up here. Well, this is all that Terence Crawford is saying. He's essentially saying, I don't believe that Canelo Alvarez deals with the upper body movement that we place an emphasis on particularly well. So this idea that people are up in arms about what he said, for me, it's a misunderstanding of what he's trying to say. Like I said, I don't agree with him. Jamal Charlo, Andrade, yeah, brilliant fighters. I don't believe either one of them beats Canelo Alvarez. But who else is there in the top 10 or 15, really, that is knocking on the door for a shot at Canelo Alvarez for us to have assumed this concept that he's ducking when he's fought Trout, he's fought Mosley, he's fought Mayweather, he's fought Danny Jacobs and put in one of the best performances, if not the best performance of his career. So I don't believe there's any truth to what he's saying. I mean, the only other guys that I can look at that would be, I don't know if he's mixed race, but Rob Brant, I guess. But, you know, I don't think he's considered by many to be a particularly massive threat to Canelo Alvarez. Chris Eubank Jr., you know, he's another one who's mixed race. I personally think that's a really interesting fight. I believe he gets knocked out because I don't think he deals particularly well with the jab, and I think Canelo's just levels above. So none of these fighters are the sorts of fighters that I'm looking at and I'm thinking, man, Canelo doesn't want any of that smoke. There's a series of fighters here. They all bring a system that's completely wrong for Canelo, and I think he's going to lose the fight. I don't see that. So no, I don't agree with Crawford. But his comment, if you try to understand it, is not as controversial as all these people are making out. It's just not as controversial. I can see why he's saying what he's saying. I just don't agree with him. Let me know what you think about this. Do you agree with Terence Crawford? Maybe you've noticed, or you feel you've noticed a pattern. Maybe you agree with me and you think it is more about culture than race. And again, maybe you've noticed a pattern. Or maybe you agree with me and also believe that, yes, these things can exist, this culture of fighting and different styles of fighting and how one system can cause another system problems, but you don't see it applying to Canelo Alvarez, which is where I stand on this. Or maybe you are one of those people who has been offended. I've seen people calling him racist and stuff. Do you think he's talking directly about skin color and that he has an agenda? Maybe that's your view on this. Let me know. Let me know in the comments down below, wherever it is you stand on this. Thank you for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.